My father threw me and my family out because I was the poorest among my brothers. In his eyes, I was the shame, the failure, the one who didn't deserve a place in his house anymore. That night, the living room was filled with my brothers and their wives, their laughter echoing off the marble walls. Gold watches flashed on their wrists. Designer dresses shimmered under the chandelier. My children clung to me, confused, as I stood silent at the edge of the room. Father rose from his chair, his voice sharp enough to slice through the noise. He looked at me, his eyes cold, and declared in front of everyone, "You are poor. You will never be like your brothers. This house belongs to those who bring pride, not shame." My wife gasped. My brothers smirked. Their wives whispered to each other, covering their mouths to hide their cruel smiles. Father tossed the keys of the house onto the glass table, and without hesitation pointed them toward my eldest brother. I begged him to reconsider. Years of loyalty, sacrifice, and sleepless nights flashed through my mind. Moments I thought would mean something to him. But Father turned his back on me as if I had never existed. He ordered the guards to throw me, my wife, and my children out into the night. No time to pack, no chance to breathe. We were pushed out of the gates like beggars. As my brothers watched from the balcony, glasses of champagne in hand, laughing at my downfall, the mansion lights glowed behind me while the street was cold and dark. My children cried from hunger. My wife held them close, and I stood there with nothing but rage and humiliation burning in my chest. That night I swore a silent promise. If my father saw me as poor, then one day I would rise so high that even he would regret the day he chose wealth over blood. But I didn't know then. My struggle had only just begun. Ryan and his family stand in the cold streets, abandoned by their own bloodline, unaware that a storm of betrayal and opportunity is about to unfold. The streets felt colder than ever that night. The world had changed in a single evening. One moment, I had a father, a family, and a place I thought was home. The next, I was nothing but a man standing in the dirt with his wife and children, carrying shame heavier than any burden. The guards had slammed the mansion gates shut behind us. The sound still rang in my ears like a final judgment. Inside, the lights glowed warm and bright. Laughter spilled into the night air, and glasses clinked as if celebrating my exile. My brothers and their wives stood by the windows, smirking as though this humiliation was the entertainment they had been waiting for. I gripped my wife's hand tighter. She tried to be strong, though I could see her eyes were wet with unfallen tears. Our children shivered, pressing close to her for warmth. I looked down the empty road, and for the first time in years I had no idea where to go. We walked, step after step, the sound of my children's small feet dragging across the pavement cut through me more painfully than Father's words. The mansion lights grew distant until the night swallowed them. We reached a cheap roadside motel. The sign flickered weakly, half of its letters burned out. Inside, the air smelled of damp carpet and cigarettes. The clerk eyed us with suspicion, as if poverty itself carried a stench. I handed over the last few bills in my wallet, and he tossed me a room key without a word. The room was small, walls peeling, one dim bulb flickering above. My wife tucked the children into the bed, pulling the thin blanket around them. I sat on the edge, staring at the cracks in the wall, hearing Father's voice over and over. "You are poor. You will never be like your brothers." Sleep never came. My chest burned with rage, but also with fear. How would I feed my family tomorrow? How would I protect them when the world now saw me as worthless? Morning came too soon. My children's stomachs growled, their eyes heavy. I walked the streets searching for work, knocking on doors, asking anyone who would listen. Most looked me up and down and turned me away. Some laughed, asking why a man dressed like a beggar thought he could find real work. By evening, I returned with nothing but a bag of stale bread. My wife tore it into small pieces so the children would have enough. She tried to smile as she handed them their share, but her hands trembled. I sat in silence, the bread turning to ash in my mouth. Days turned into weeks. The motel bills drained what little I had left. We moved to a smaller room, then finally to the streets. I sold my watch, my shoes, anything that could buy a meal. My wife sold her jewelry, heirlooms she once swore she would keep for our daughter's wedding. One night, rain poured over us as we huddled under an abandoned bus stop. My children clung to me, their bodies cold and frail. My wife's face was pale, exhaustion carved into every line. I thought of my brothers then, sitting in warm leather chairs, sipping wine, boasting about their wealth while their children played in golden nurseries. My father, proud of them, proud of their riches, blind to the cruelty he had unleashed on us. I clenched my fists. The rain hid my tears, but inside me something began to harden. I had lost everything, my dignity, my home, my place in the family, but I had not lost my will. That night, as thunder rumbled above and my family shivered beside me, I swore again, louder this time, clearer in my heart. I will rise, I will build, and when I stand taller than all of them, they will know the price of calling me poor. The storm passed, but I could feel another kind of storm forming in my soul, and it would not stop until I took back everything. Ryan and his family reached their lowest point, homeless, hungry, humiliated. But in the fire of despair, Ryan makes a vow. He will rise no matter what it takes. The storm had passed, but its weight still sat on my shoulders. My children slept curled together. My wife lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, and I sat in silence. My thoughts a whirlwind of shame and determination. The vow I made in the rain echoed inside me. I didn't know how, I didn't know when. But one thing was certain, I would rise. The next morning, my body was sore from the night spent on hard benches in dirty streets, but I forced myself up. I could not let my children starve again. I walked through the city, knocking on doors, asking, begging for work. Shopkeepers shook their heads, muttering that they didn't hire beggars. At the construction sites, supervisors laughed, telling me to come back when I had proper boots. Every rejection pressed me down like a weight, but I refused to collapse. By late afternoon, I stumbled toward the industrial edge of the city. Smoke billowed from chimneys, trucks rattled along cracked roads. That's when I saw it, an old warehouse buzzing with activity. Men shouted orders, forklifts beeped, crates clattered onto the floor. I walked closer. The foreman, a broad-shouldered man with arms like steel beams, squinted at me. His eyes flicked over my torn clothes and worn shoes. For a moment, I thought he'd send me away like everyone else. Instead, he tossed me a pair of dirty gloves. "Unload those crates," he grunted. "If you last the day, I'll pay you cash. No contract. No promises. Just a chance." I grabbed the first crate, and the weight nearly crushed me. My arms shook, my back screamed, but I clenched my teeth and carried it. Then another. And another. My hands blistered and bled, my muscles begged for rest. But every time I thought of stopping, I saw my children's hollow faces, my wife's tired smile. The hours crawled. By nightfall, my shirt clung to me, drenched in sweat. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, convinced I couldn't move another inch. The foreman walked over, his heavy boots echoing on the concrete. He studied me, then pulled out a few crumpled bills and slapped them into my palm. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Let's see if you're tougher than you look." I staggered out into the night, exhausted but alive. With those bills, I bought warm bread, milk, and a small portion of rice. When I handed the bag to my wife, her eyes filled with tears. My children laughed as they ate, crumbs falling onto their hands. That laughter, after weeks of silence and hunger, was worth more than all the gold my brothers flaunted. For the first time since Father cast us out, hope flickered, the days blurred together. Each morning I returned to the warehouse. Each evening I brought home just enough to keep my family alive. My back grew stronger, my hands calloused. And though the work paid little, I saved every coin I could. But fate is cruel. One evening, as I walked home with a small bag of food, I froze. Across the street, under the golden glow of a luxury hotel's lights, I saw them. My brothers. I walked closer. The foreman, a broad-shouldered man with arms like steel beams, squinted at me. His eyes flicked over my torn clothes and worn shoes. For a moment, I thought he'd send me away like everyone else. Instead, he tossed me a pair of dirty gloves. "Unload those crates," he grunted. "If you last the day, I'll pay you cash. No contract, no promises, just a chance." I grabbed the first crate, and the weight nearly crushed me. My arms shook, my back screamed, but I clenched my teeth and carried it. Then another. And another. My hands blistered and bled, my muscles begged for rest. But every time I thought of stopping, I saw my children's hollow faces, my wife's tired smile. The hours crawled. By nightfall, my shirt clung to me, drenched in sweat. I collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, convinced I couldn't move another inch. The foreman walked over, his heavy boots echoing on the concrete. He studied me, then pulled out a few crumpled bills and slapped them into my palm. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Let's see if you're tougher than you look." I staggered out into the night, exhausted but alive. With those bills, I bought warm bread, milk, and a small portion of rice. When I handed the bag to my wife, her eyes filled with tears. My children laughed as they ate, crumbs falling onto their hands. That laughter, after weeks of silence and hunger, was worth more than all the gold my brothers flaunted. For the first time since Father cast us out, hope flickered. The days blurred together. Each morning I returned to the warehouse. Each evening I brought home just enough to keep my family alive. My back grew stronger, my hands calloused. And though the work paid little, I saved every coin I could. But fate is cruel. One evening, as I walked home with a small bag of food, I froze. Across the street, under the golden glow of a luxury hotel's lights, I saw them. My brothers. They stepped out of sleek black cars, their wives wrapped in silk and diamonds. Father was with them, dressed in his finest suit, his arm resting proudly on my eldest brother's shoulder. The sight tore into me. My brothers were everything Father claimed I wasn't: rich, polished, celebrated. I stood on the opposite side of the street, clothes soaked in sweat, hands rough from labor. They noticed me. At first silence, then smirks. My eldest brother whispered something that made the others laugh. One of their wives raised her phone and snapped a photo, no doubt to mock me later. Another said loudly enough for me to hear, "Look at him, a laborer now, covered in dirt. How pathetic." Father's eyes met mine for the briefest second. Then without a word he turned away. To him I was invisible, a ghost, a stranger. The laughter stabbed me, but it didn't break me. Not this time. My fists clenched, my teeth ground together, and in that moment my shame turned into fuel. If they saw me as dirt, I would rise like stone. If they saw me as poor, I would rise as wealth itself. I swore silently. One day, I would stand higher than all of them. And when that day came, they would choke on their pride. The warehouse gave me survival, but survival was not enough. I needed more. Weeks later, opportunity whispered in the most unexpected place. I was unloading crates late one night when I overheard two men talking. Near the loading dock, their voices carried over the sound of rattling machinery. "Old repair shop on East Market's closing down," one said. "Owner's too old to run it. Place is going for nothing." My pulse quickened. A shop, a chance. I'd saved a small stack of bills, barely enough to keep us fed for another week. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough for this. The next morning I found the shop. The sign was faded, letters chipped, but I could see the bones of it. Tools lined the walls, machines waited in silence, dust thick on the counters. An old man sat behind the desk, his hands rough, his eyes tired. I introduced myself, telling him I had heard he was closing. He nodded slowly. 40 years, he said. I built this place with my hands. But these hands aren't what they used to be. I told him I wanted to take over. I didn't tell him everything about Father or my brothers, only that I had a family to feed and I wasn't afraid of work. The old man studied me. His gaze was sharp, as if weighing not just my words but the fire behind them. After a long silence, he said, "If you're serious, I'll give you a chance. Not many would want this place. But you, I see something in you, something hungry." I shook his hand, feeling strength surge through me. For the first time since being thrown out, I had something more than survival. I had a path forward. That night, I returned to my wife with news. Her eyes lit up, her tired face breaking into the kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. We hugged, our children cheering as if I had already won. But fate never gives without testing, because even as hope returned to me, a shadow was watching. Word of my interest in the shop had reached ears I wished it hadn't. One of my brothers had heard, and he was determined to crush me before I could rise. Ryan finally finds a sliver of hope, a shop he could rebuild into a future. But his brothers catch wind of it, and sabotage is already on its way. The morning sun stretched across the cracked streets. As I walked toward the old repair shop, the place that had become a flicker of light in the endless darkness, my heart pounded with both fear and determination. This was not just a shop. It was a chance to reclaim dignity, to prove that Father's words were wrong, that I was not destined to be poor forever. The old man was waiting for me. He handed me a heavy ring of keys, each one clinking like a promise. His eyes lingered on me for a long time, as if passing more than just a building. It was trust, history, and the weight of his own life's work. "Take care of it," he said, voice raspy but steady. "This place has heart. Don't let it die." I nodded, swallowing hard, unable to find words. That first day, I walked through every inch of the shop. Dust covered the counters, cobwebs draped from shelves. Machines were rusted from years of neglect. The place looked abandoned, forgotten, but I didn't see decay. I saw potential. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a broom, and began to sweep. My wife joined me, tying a cloth around her head, scrubbing walls until her arms ached. Even the children pitched in, carrying buckets of water, picking up scraps, laughing as they helped. For the first time in months, their laughter wasn't broken by hunger or sadness. It was the laughter of hope. We worked from sunrise until the stars returned, our hands raw, our clothes soaked in sweat. But by the end of the week, the shop had begun to breathe again. Dust gave way to polished counters. Machines hummed after oiling, and the smell of old rust was replaced by the sharp tang of fresh paint. Could feel life returning to the walls. Customers came slowly at first. A man with a broken lawnmower, a woman with a stove that wouldn't heat. They looked at me skeptically, but when I fixed their things quickly and charged them little, their faces softened. Word began to spread. The new man at East Market's repair shop was honest, hardworking and skilled. Coins clinked in the cash box. My children had full stomachs. My wife smiled more often. For the first time since Father threw us out, the air around us felt lighter. But success does not go unnoticed. One evening, just as I was closing the shop, I saw a car I knew too well, sleek, black, polished until it gleamed. My brother stepped out, his suit tailored, his shoes shining. He looked around the shop with disdain, lips curling as if the air smelled foul. "So it's true," he sneered. "You've reduced yourself to this. Grease, tools, dirt, a beggar's business." I stayed silent, my jaw tightening. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, though his words cut sharper than any shout. "You think you can rise from this? Don't be foolish. Father already made his choice. We are the heirs. You're just a shadow. Stay in your place." My hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage I could barely contain. Before leaving, he glanced at the glowing light inside where my wife and children waited. His smirk widened. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Shadows don't shine for long." The next morning I arrived to find the shop vandalized. Windows shattered, shelves overturned, tools scattered across the floor. A bucket of black paint had been thrown against the wall, dripping like blood. My children gasped. My wife covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. I knew instantly who had done it. For a moment, despair threatened to drown me. The little I had built with my bare hands, gone in a night. My brother's words echoed in my head. Shadows don't shine for long. But then I looked at my children. Their eyes weren't filled with defeat. They were waiting to see if I would give up, waiting to see if I was the failure Father claimed I was. I picked up the broom. "We rebuild," I said. And we did. Neighbors came to help, some customers too, people who had seen my work and felt my honesty. Together we fixed the broken windows, scrubbed the walls, set the shelves right again. By nightfall, the shop was not only repaired, it was stronger than before. The sabotage had failed, but my brother wasn't finished. Days later, rumors spread through the market. Whispers that my shop sold faulty repairs, that I stole from customers, that I was running the place illegally. The whispers grew, carried on the tongues of merchants and buyers alike. Customers turned cold, some refusing to return. I traced the rumors back and found their source. My brother's friends, planted like poison seeds in the market. Fury burned in me, but I didn't confront him. Instead, I worked harder. Every customer that dared to come, I treated with extra care. I fixed their things better than new, charged them fairly, sometimes even less than I should. Slowly, word began to turn again. People realized the rumors were lies. Trust rebuilt. But my brother's cruelty escalated. One night, as I walked home with my wife and children, a group of men cornered me in a dark alley. Their faces were shadowed, their hands heavy with chains and pipes. They didn't speak. They just swung. Pain exploded across my ribs, my arms, my back. I fought back, but there were too many. My wife screamed. My children cried. But the men didn't stop until I was left bleeding on the ground. When they fled, I tasted blood in my mouth and knew this wasn't random. This was him. My brother wanted me broken, crawling, begging for mercy. But as I lay in the dirt, I made another vow. If he thought he could destroy me, he was wrong. Every blow he sent only hardened me. Every scar was a reminder that I was still alive, still fighting. And deep inside, I began to realize something powerful. I didn't just want to survive anymore. I wanted to rise higher than all of them, higher than Father, higher than my brothers who laughed in luxury while I bled in the shadows. The shop was not the end. It was only the beginning, and soon the world would see that. The son they called. Poor was destined to become far, greater than the ones who mocked him. Ryan rebuilds his shop despite sabotage, rumors, and even violence. But his resilience awakens a fire. He no longer wants survival, he wants power. His brothers don't know it yet, but they've created their greatest rival. The bruises on my ribs hadn't faded. The cuts on my arms still stung with every movement. But I returned to the shop the next morning anyway. Pain didn't matter anymore. What mattered was proving to my children that their father was stronger than every blow, stronger than every betrayal, stronger than the shame forced upon us. The shop buzzed again with activity. Customers trickled in slowly at first, but their trust grew each time they left satisfied. A man came with a broken heater, a woman with an old sewing machine. When they saw my work, when they felt my sincerity, they returned with friends, neighbors, cousins. Word spread beyond East Market. There was a small repair shop run by a man who worked like no other. The coins in my cash box grew heavier. But one evening, as I counted the day's earnings, I realized something. If I stayed this way, working alone, my shop would never grow. I would always be a man fixing one item at a time, feeding my family but never rising beyond survival. I thought of Father's words dripping with contempt. You are poor. You will never be like your brothers. I clenched my fist around the bills. I would not only be like them, I would surpass them. The next morning, I placed a small sign in the shop window, hiring apprentice. A boy named Daniel came. He was young, barely 20, his hands inexperienced but eager. He reminded me of myself, hungry for a chance. I trained him, taught him the craft, and within weeks, he was handling small repairs with steady confidence. With Daniel by my side, I could focus on bigger projects, faster turnarounds. The shop doubled in output. Then another came, a middle-aged man named Carlos, laid off from a factory. He had experience with machines larger than anything in my shop. I welcomed him, and together, the three of us transformed the shop into a hive of industry. Customers no longer just trickled in, they flooded the doors. But with growth came another problem. The shop was too small. Orders piled up. Customers waited in lines that stretched down the block. It was chaos, the kind of chaos that hides opportunity in plain sight. I looked at my wife one evening, our children asleep in the next room, the sound of coins clinking as I poured the day's earnings onto the table. We need more, I said. More space, more workers, more reach. The shop is not enough. Her eyes widened with both fear and pride.
Do you mean?
Another shop. I nodded. It was madness. I had only just managed to stabilize this one. But inside me burned a fire that refused to settle for scraps. I began searching the city. Weeks later, I found it, an abandoned storefront near the heart of downtown. The rent was steep, higher than anything I had ever imagined paying. My savings would barely cover the deposit. But standing there, staring through the dusty windows, I saw the future. Crowds rushing past, the endless hum of the city, the heartbeat of opportunity. If I placed my roots here, I could grow beyond the shadows of my brothers. I signed the lease. We moved quickly. I brought Daniel and Carlos with me, split shifts between the two shops. My wife handled the register. The children helped with simple tasks. And soon the downtown shop came alive. Its location alone brought customers in droves, businessmen with malfunctioning devices, families with broken appliances, mechanics needing spare parts. In just months, profits soared. What was once survival money had become real wealth. I reinvested every coin, buying better tools, more workers, larger machines. The repair shop expanded into a full-service business, electronics, machinery, even custom-built parts. And as my empire began to take shape, whispers reached me. My brothers had noticed. At first, they laughed. A repairman trying to rise above his station. But laughter turned to unease as my shops filled with customers. As merchants spoke my name with respect, as my reputation stretched beyond the city into neighboring towns. One evening, while I locked up the downtown shop, I saw them again. My brothers standing across the street, their luxury cars idling behind them. Their eyes narrowed, their smiles forced. One of them shouted, "Don't get too comfortable!" Ryan, repair shops don't make kings. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The line of customers behind me, waiting even after hours, was response enough. Yet their warning wasn't empty. Sabotage returned, harsher, more deliberate. Fake inspectors showed up, demanding bribes, threatening to shut me down for violations. Suppliers suddenly refused to deliver parts. Contracts mysteriously canceled. I knew whose hands pulled the strings. But I adapted. I found new suppliers, paid the inspectors nothing, and fought every threat with stubborn grit. Each attack only pushed me to grow smarter, sharper, stronger. And then came the breakthrough. A wealthy businessman visited my shop one morning. His suit was expensive, his manner calm, but his eyes studied everything. My workers, my tools, my customers. When I repaired his imported machine in record time, his face broke into a rare smile. "You're not just a repairman," he said. "You're building something." He invited me to lunch the next day, over a table set with food I could barely pronounce. He made an offer that would change everything. "Partner with me. I'll invest. You expand. You've got the skill, I've got the capital. Together we can open 10 shops, maybe 20. I nearly dropped my fork. 10, 20. It felt impossible, but his eyes were serious. I thought of my father, my brothers, the laughter, the humiliation. Then I thought of my children, their hungry faces the night we were thrown out. "I accept," I said, and so began a new chapter. With his investment, my small repair business exploded into a chain. Shops opened across the city, each one bearing my name. Workers wore uniforms. Customers received receipts. Systems were in place. We were no longer a humble repair shop. We were a brand. Profits multiplied. My family moved into a comfortable home. My children enrolled in good schools. My wife no longer carried the weight of despair in her eyes. But with success came an invitation. One evening a letter arrived, stamped with Father's seal. He was hosting a grand dinner at the mansion. My brothers would be there. He requested my presence. I read it again and again, my hands trembling. After years of being cast out, ignored, humiliated, Father was calling me back. Why? Curiosity burned in me. Pride too. I wanted him to see what he had thrown away. To see the son he called poor standing taller than ever. But I also knew this was no simple dinner. Behind Father's invitation there was always a hidden game. I folded the letter and whispered to myself, "Let them see me now." Ryan rises from repairman to business owner, then to the leader of a growing empire. Just as success blooms, Father calls him back to the mansion that once cast him out. The letter weighed heavy in my pocket as I walked up the old familiar road that led to Father's mansion. Years ago, I had been dragged down this same path with nothing but humiliation clinging to my skin. My wife and children crying behind me as the gates slammed shut. Now I returned with my head high, my steps steady, and a fire in my chest that no one could extinguish. The gates loomed before me, tall and iron-wrought, the same ones that had barred me out when I was declared too poor to belong. A guard approached, his eyes narrowing in recognition. He hesitated for a moment, then opened the gates without a word. The mansion stood bathed in golden light, its windows glowing like eyes that had watched me from afar all these years. Luxury cars lined the driveway, polished until they gleamed. The air smelled of expensive cigars and wine. Laughter floated out from within, that same cruel laughter I had heard when Father cast me out. I entered. The grand hall was alive with chatter and music. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, silk curtains swayed. Servants moved quietly between the guests, carrying silver trays. My brothers stood together near the long dining table, their wives adorned in diamonds, their voices loud enough to remind everyone how important they were. And then silence. They saw me. My eldest brother raised his glass with a mocking smile. "Well, look who's crawled back." The poor man with his little shop. The others chuckled. Their wives whispered behind manicured hands. Father sat at the head of the table, his face stern, unreadable. His eyes fixed on me, and for a long moment he said nothing. I walked forward unshaken. My clothes were simple but clean, my posture proud. I didn't need silk or gold to command respect. I had built my worth with my own hands, and it radiated from me like armor. Finally, Father spoke. His voice was calm, measured, but sharp. "You've done well," he said, "for a man I thought would die in the streets." His words were not praise, but they were acknowledgement. And in this house, acknowledgement was worth more than gold. I met his gaze without flinching. "I survived because you forced me to, and now I live better than you ever imagined." Gasps rippled through the hall. My brothers sneered, but Father only leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Sit," he ordered. I sat across from him, the same seat I had once been denied. Servants poured wine into crystal glasses, set plates of steaming food before us. But I wasn't hungry. I wanted answers. Father's eyes glittered as he studied me. "You've grown strong. Strong enough to be noticed. Strong enough to be a threat to your brothers." A threat, so that was it. He wasn't calling me here to reconcile, to apologize, or to welcome me back. He was testing me. measuring the son he once called poor against the sons he crowned as heirs. The dinner began. My brothers boasted about their businesses, their investments, their connections. They spoke of deals worth millions, of properties scattered across the country. Their wives laughed, their jewels catching the light like fire. I let them talk. I listened. And when the time came, I spoke of my own empire, how my shops had multiplied, how customers lined up across the city, how investors had partnered with me to expand further. Their laughter faltered. Their smiles stiffened. The wives stopped whispering. Father's expression remained calm, but I saw it. The faintest flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even pride. But pride was dangerous. It meant he was thinking, calculating. When the dinner ended, Father called me aside into his private study. The door shut behind us, silencing the noise of the hall. The room smelled of old leather and smoke, the shelves lined with books and relics from his youth. He poured himself a drink, then looked at me. "You've proven me wrong," he said quietly. "But remember, in this family, strength is not given. It is taken." I stood tall. "Then I'll take what's mine." His lips curled into the faintest smile. "We shall see." When I left the mansion that night, the weight in my chest had shifted. I had not been invited back as a son. I had been invited back as a rival. And rivals in Father's world did not coexist. From that day, the war truly began. My brothers tightened their grip on the market, using their wealth to cut off my supply lines, to undercut my prices, to lure away my customers with false promises. They sent inspectors, lawyers, even bribed officials to try and shut me down. But I adapted. When suppliers refused me, I built my own. When customers were lured away, I created loyalty programs, giving them reasons to return. When inspectors came with threats, I had every permit, every paper, every license prepared. Every attack they launched only made me sharper, stronger, harder to kill. Meanwhile, my shops grew. 10 became 15, then 20. My name spread beyond the city across regions. Investors sought me out. Banks that once ignored me now called with offers. And yet Father watched in silence, never intervening, never choosing a side. He let the war play out, like a king watching gladiators in his arena. But I could feel it. Something larger loomed. Father was waiting for the moment to make his final move. And deep inside I knew, when that moment came, it wouldn't just be about money or shops or pride. It would be about everything: blood, legacy, power. And I was ready. Ryan returns to the mansion not as a beggar, but as a rival. His father makes it clear, and in this family, strength is taken, not given. The brothers launch a full-scale war to crush him. But Ryan adapts and grows stronger. Yet behind it all, Father waits, preparing a final move that could change everything. The city lights burned against the night sky as I stood on the balcony of my newest office tower. Below me, traffic roared, neon signs flickered. And the empire I had built from dirt and sweat stretched across districts like veins of fire. It had taken years, battles fought in silence, scars earned in shadows and endless nights of pain. But I had risen. From a man thrown into the streets as too poor, I had become a name that echoed in boardrooms, in markets, in homes. My shops had become factories. Factories became industries. Industries became corporations. And yet, despite all I had built, the war was not over. Father's silence lingered like a storm on the horizon. My brothers fought me at every step, using every weapon wealth and power could buy. But each time they struck, I endured, adapted, grew stronger. Still, I knew the truth. This would not end until Father made his choice. Until he decided who would inherit not just his wealth, but his throne. The summons came in the form of another letter. This one, not an invitation to dinner. It was a command. The words were simple. "Come to the mansion, tomorrow. The decision will be made." I folded the letter slowly, my hands steady, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment everything had been leading toward. The next evening I returned to the mansion. The gates opened once more, but this time the guards did not look at me as an outcast. They stood straighter, their eyes cautious, as if they knew the weight I now carried. Inside, the grand hall was silent. No music, no laughter, no servants moving about with trays. Only Father sitting at the head of the long table, and my brothers lined up on either side. The air was thick with tension. Father's voice was steady but cold. "Tonight this family chooses its heir." My brothers' eyes burned into me. Smirks, sneers, clenched jaws. They thought they were entitled, born to inherit what Father had built. To them, I was still the poor son, the exile who didn't belong. But I saw something else in Father's eyes. He was watching, waiting, testing. He wanted to see which of us would fight hardest. Which of us was willing to take it all. Not beg, not plead, but take. The first test came in words. My eldest brother rose, boasting of his businesses, his connections, his wealth. He spoke of deals struck across continents, of investments that grew by millions. His voice was smooth, confident, practiced. The second brother followed, speaking of influence, of politicians in his pocket, of doors he could open that others couldn't. The third bragged of properties. The fourth of power in circles Father respected. Each one presented himself as the worthy heir, their words dripping with arrogance. Finally, all eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. I won't list numbers, I said, my voice steady. I won't speak of connections or properties. What I have built, I built from nothing. I was thrown into the streets with my wife and children, with no coin, no shelter, no support. You left me to die, and yet here I stand, not because of luck. Not because of gifts, but because I refused to break. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with Father's. If you want an heir who knows what it means to fight for every breath, to bleed for every step, to build with his own hands, then look at me. If you want someone who knows how to survive in the ashes and rise in the fire, then you already know your choice. The hall fell silent. My brothers' faces twisted with rage. They saw Father's eyes narrow, not in dismissal, but in thought. The second test came not in words, but in action. Father gestured, and the study doors opened. Servants carried in a stack of files, documents, and ledgers. Father's voice cut through the silence. These are failing companies. Businesses drowning in debt. Each of you will take one, save it, or watch it die. In 6 months, we will see who stands and who falls. A cruel smile flickered on his lips. Then the heir will be chosen. The months that followed were war. My brothers threw money recklessly at their companies, buying influence, bribing officials, throwing lavish campaigns to mask the rot beneath. They played their games the way they always had, with arrogance and excess. I approached differently. The company Father gave me was a factory on the edge of collapse. Workers unpaid, machines rusted, debts mounting. My brothers mocked me when they saw it. That's not a company, that's a graveyard, one laughed. But I saw life where they saw death. I walked the factory floor, spoke with the workers, listened to their struggles. I paid them first before paying myself. I repaired the machines, not with extravagance, but with efficiency. I cut waste, tightened operations, introduced new systems. Slowly, painfully, the factory began to breathe again. Workers who had lost faith returned with loyalty sharper than steel. Production increased, debts shrank, contracts renewed. Within months, the factory was not just surviving, it was thriving. When the 6 months ended, Father called us back to the mansion. My brothers came dressed in wealth, boasting of the millions they had poured into their companies. But when Father opened their files, the truth was clear. Their businesses had crumbled further, drowning under the weight of their arrogance. Then came mine. Father read the reports in silence. Profits steady, debts paid, workers loyal, growth sustainable. He looked up slowly, and for the first time in my life I saw it. Respect in his eyes. My brothers erupted. Shouts, accusations, rage spilling into the hall. They called me a liar, a cheat, demanded Father dismiss me. But their voices faltered when Father raised his hand. The room fell silent. His voice was sharp as a blade. Ryan has done what none of you could. He took nothing and made it live. He built from ashes, while you wasted what was given to you. He rose, his figure towering, his presence filling the hall. The heir of this family was Ryan. The words crashed through me. My brothers screamed in protest, their faces red with fury, their fists clenched. But it was done. Father had chosen. I looked at him, at the man who once cast me out as worthless. Now he declared me heir. Not because I was richest, not because I was favored, but because I had proven myself through fire. I had taken what was mine. But the story did not end in triumph, because as I walked out of the mansion that night, my brother's eyes followed me, not with defeat, but with vengeance. And I knew blood was thicker than water, but greed was thicker than blood. The war was not over. It had only entered its deadliest chapter. Ryan is declared the heir after years of humiliation, betrayal, and struggle. He has risen from nothing to become the chosen successor, but his brothers refuse to accept defeat. And the storm of greed and vengeance is only beginning.